On the 3rd of May 2002, at 7:30 p.m, Claire Roderick jumped to her death from a car park in Reading.
That's a pretty strong, cold wind.
Guy Roderick, Claire's father, is 64. He works as a consultant and lives with his second wife, Kathy. They have been married for nearly 2 years and divide their time between their homes in London, Dorset and South Africa.
If I get right, I see.
Guy had 4 children from his first marriage.
Claire was the youngest, and she was just totally happy and outgoing and the life and soul of the party. A joy as a child, actually. Well, pretty much a joy as a young adult until illness started to interfere, actually.
Like Edward Best, Claire suffered from schizophrenia. She started showing symptoms in her early 20s.
Claire was fine until her 3rd year at university, really. And then she started doing some strange things, and that was the first time we really had any reason to worry about her mental health. I'm pretty sure that she went to raves when she was at university, and therefore I think there were drugs involved. I don't think she'd have had schizophrenia if she didn't take drugs, and the drugs were ecstasy as far as I know.
At 14 he discovered cannabis, and that's when he started smoking the cannabis. I wasn't aware of that. I knew he'd started smoking because I smelled cigarette smoke, and I told him I wasn't happy, and he knew that. I didn't know he was involved in cannabis then.
A recent study has shown that people who use cannabis before the age of 15 were 4 times more likely to have schizophrenia in their mid-20s. Edward was told by his doctors that smoking cannabis was linked to his delusions and voices.
He went through a phase of smoking it after he'd been diagnosed and he'd been told how dangerous it was, and that's what started the last lot of delusions and led him to think that people were coming out trying to kill him and that he needed to kill himself, which is tragic.
Claire made her first suicide attempt at the age of 24.
She lay on the tracks just outside Slough railway station, but she lay parallel to the tracks, so the train just passed over it.
Claire lived with schizophrenia for a further 3 years before jumping to her death. She did not leave a suicide note. Without this, the coroner could only return an open verdict on her death.
It did provoke some questions, because we don't know why she did it. She had no financial problems then. She had no housing problems then. She'd been discharged, so I don't understand why she did it.
Edward did leave a suicide note. Without realizing, Joy had found him writing it.
He was so engrossed in what he was writing, he didn't realise it was there, and it made him jump. And I apologised and said, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, carry on writing if you want, you're writing some more poems. And he just said yes, folded up these pieces of paper and put them in his pocket and said, I've done it now. And I realised later that he was actually writing his suicide letter, and I had no idea. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine, dead. Please be happy for me. Live with the best possible life. And when I realised Friday the 28th of March how ill I was and how serious my condition is and how serious what I was saying was, it was too late to save my life. Miss you even though I'll be gone. It's Sunday the 30th. Can't read anymore.
Both Edward and Claire were patients at the Fair Mile Mental Health Hospital.
You could never go back from having put them in the lunatic asylum, to put it in its worst way. You have done that, and the very first time is frighteningly hard. Because you realise you've destroyed a trust in you as the parent. You don't do it light-heartedly, and you don't enjoy doing it.
Edward had been admitted to the Fair Mile just 4 hours prior to his suicide. Joy has returned there for the first time since her son died.
He was put in an acute admissions ward. He was mentally ill. He'd already attempted suicide that day. So you would imagine that he would be on suicide watch, and that they would be very careful with him, and that because of the delusions he had, that they would have sedated him or given him something to calm and remove the delusions and allow him to sleep. And it didn't happen. And nobody really knows why. The whole instinct was not to leave him there, and I should have listened to that because he wasn't safe. And none of us would be feeling this now. None of us would be going through this pain. If only when I looked back and I saw him there and I wanted to say, come home, Edward, come back with me. If I'd have done that, none of us would be in this state now.
Claire was discharged from the Fairmile only a few weeks into a 6-month sectioning. Guy was abroad and was not told that she was no longer under hospital care. 2 weeks later, she jumped to her death.
We weren't even notified she'd come out. And the care in the community idea is fine, so long as there is actually some care in the community. It's not just Claire. It's not me saying my daughter is a very special case. She is, of course, a special case to me. But she's a general case. People who are discharged with schizophrenic style or hallucinatory illnesses are not getting the care they need immediately after they're discharged.
Nearly half of patient suicides happen during or soon after inpatient care.
You feel totally helpless working with the authorities or the care in the community people, because you're constantly banging your head against a wall and trying to say, this person is ill. Edward was lost and I was lost, and I think there's a lot of anger in me with the way things are run. His voice and his life has been taken away from him through illness and through neglect, really, through people not taking what was wrong with him seriously.
Joy has since received a formal apology from the Berkshire Healthcare NHS Trust, admitting that the treatment Edward received was below an acceptable standard. The Fairmile Hospital closed down in spring 2003. It is now 19 months since Edward Best committed suicide. Today would have been his 22nd birthday. In his memory, Joy, Nigel and Emma all have his favourite meal of steak and chips. They have had a surprise. The assistant coroner has suddenly been in touch.
I know it sounds very strange, he said, and I'm very sorry because it probably will bring up memories and things, he said, but I have some money of Edward's, and I was just astounded. I said, where'd that come from? And he said, well, it's just been passed on to me. He said there's about £130. It is bizarre because it's Edward's birthday today, and it felt like, well, I had his birthday on me month. Maybe Edward is around watching what's happening and trying to do his best to make things easier.
Joy has begun to see a counsellor in the hope that it might help her work through her grief.
Talking's the one thing I probably don't always do enough of. Part because I think I don't want to bore people, like, you know, I can't keep saying the same thing over and over and over again to Nigel.
Do you think you ever make any progress in that, you know, any steps forward when you're talking? All of a sudden something changes, you know, you might talk about it one week and then the next week you'll come back and talk about it again, and something might have just clicked or something.
I don't think I've done it enough to be able to move on, because I have this terrible thing about saying the same thing over and over again, yet there is a need inside you to talk about it, almost to sort of clear it out your head of what happened that weekend and why it happened. I feel responsible for anything that goes wrong. I think somewhere along the way I've done something that's caused it. Even if I haven't, it's the way I feel, because I think that's the way I've grown up.
Suicide, the door's wide open for a lot of guilt if you're not very careful. You know, it's the first rule of holes. When in a hole, stop digging. Well, that really applies to grief. You can take yourself down and down into depression and everything if you're not careful. And then you may go and commit suicide, you know? Because you get subsumed by the grief. And yeah, it's a terrible loss. But it's not a thing to be angry about. Just a thing to be sad about. Yeah, and then there'll be people who think I'm not sad enough about it, if you like, or that I go on living a pretty reasonable existence. But I don't think she'd have wanted people to be miserable after she'd gone. She didn't write a note, but there are a few pieces of paper. I can't believe that she would want people to be like Queen Victoria and mourn her for 50 years. But I think it improves your life, you know? So there we are. But, yeah, sad. How many precious gone?
I know it's the wrong thing to do, but sometimes I just carry on as if he's still alive.
As part of her counselling, Joy has to face up to the things she fears most in accepting her son's death. One of these is visiting his grave. This is her first visit in 6 months.
I find it difficult coming up here. He shouldn't be there. I just don't like to think that's all I have of my son. Nameless stone. I still want to see him. I still want to believe that he's alive. And when I come here, I know he's not.